I came across this uplifting story at the end of June. It was a Twitter post from David Crow which alerted me. I hope you will be as interested as I was. Back in 2021, the Australian ambassador to Ukraine, Bruce Edwards, promised the A.V. Fomin Botanic Gardens in Kyiv a Wolllemi pine tree. It was intended to be part of celebrations to commemorate the 30th anniversary of diplomatic relations between Australia and Ukraine. They were established in December 1991, just several months after Ukraine's independence was declared on 24th of August of that year. Fast forward to 2023, and the logistics in delivering a tree to Ukraine in the middle of a war made the project a little more complicated. The gardens sit in the middle of Kyiv, shown here, and are associated with the Taras Shevchenko National University of Kyiv right next door. The garden's history dates back to 1833. This green oasis occupies 22 hectares and has 17 greenhouses and 12 orangeries. The collections number over 8,000 plant species, 4,000 of them being tropical and subtropical. The garden has a very long checkered history, being virtually destroyed in the First World War after being shelled and then looted by soldiers. In the Second World War, the buildings in the Botanic Gardens housed military barracks and stables. Again, the invaders cut down many old trees for firewood, and during their retreat in 1943, the Germans looted dozens of palms and orchids. In 1974, city authorities ordered the reconstruction of the garden. The drainage system was restored and new trees were planted. In 1978, the greenhouse complex was built, with the highest in the world at that time, the 32-metre climatron seen here. It now houses many tropical plants and palms, including a 184-year-old, 30-metre tall Livistona palm, which was planted back in 1839 and has managed to survive unscathed for all that time. It flowers regularly and is a tourist drawcard. It can be viewed up close from a scary-looking walkway. Another Aussie highlight is an Illawarra flame tree, Brachychiton acerifolius. Now the centre of another war, the gardens have again suffered, this time from a combination of things. Water shortages due to infrastructure in the city being bombed, as well as suffering from power cuts, which meant the greenhouses could not be heated, and some plants being lost. Funding has been slashed as scarce resources are diverted elsewhere, and even broken glass panes in some of the greenhouses are unable to be replaced. In 2022, the Ukraine Botanic Garden Appeal was launched and is ongoing. The gardens are named after botanist Alexander Fomin, who was director between 1914 and 1935, and after retirement lived out his days in a house in the gardens. The Wolllemi pine is one of the world's oldest and rarest tree species, belonging to a 200 million year old plant family. It was known from fossil records and presumed extinct until live specimens were discovered in 1994. There are only around 100 individual trees left in the wild, in 3 small groves deep in Wolllemi National Park. The initial Wolllemi propagation was undertaken by the Royal Botanic Gardens, Sydney, and subsequently contracted out to Wolllemi Australia. Their mission is to distribute the Wolllemi pine worldwide, ensuring the longevity of the plant for future generations, and returning royalties to fund conservation of the Wolllemi pine in the wild and assist other threatened and endangered species. Seedlings in the wild are very slow growing, only 1 to 2 centimetres a year. But in ideal conditions, with plenty of sunlight and TLC, the ones in Australia and at Kew are growing at a much faster rate of around 1 metre a year, and the tallest at Kew is now well over 6 metres tall. RBG Sydney collaborated with Kew Gardens in London from the earliest days, and the first 2 trees were sent there just 3 years later in 1997. The next batch of 15 trees from their growing program in Australia was sent in 2005. In 2009, the late Duke of Edinburgh planted one of 2 Wolllemi pines near the Orangery at Kew to celebrate their 250th anniversary. The first seed from those trees was collected in 2011. The Kew website says, exploring Coatswood at Kew, one is transported to the woodlands of Australia and New Zealand, spotting the familiar ochre red bark, silvery foliage, and the menthol fragrance of eucalyptus, including the Wolllemi pine and southern beech from Tasmania, Nothofagus species. From that program in 2009, the first trees were sent to Curnock Park Plants, based at Saltash in Cornwall, to grow and market the tree in the UK and Europe. Bruce tree has been propagated from one of those first trees. Which brings us to Shaun Hopkins, who hails from the small town of Tredegar in the valleys of South Wales in the UK, and his team of volunteers, who call their charity UK4UA.org. They describe themselves as an army of donors, people, logistics companies and owner-drivers, helping relay much-needed medicines and supplies to Poland and Ukraine. Shaun says that this was his 28th run from Wales to Poland and Ukraine with supplies, which included on this trip the Bruce tree. In Australia, Pontus collects aid from charities and community groups and flies it to the UK for free in its fleet of planes. These supplies are then delivered to Poland and Ukraine by Shaun and other similar groups. These images, culled from Google, show the main gateway and entrance into the gardens. More photos from Google of the park in all 4 seasons. The beautiful building in the background through the park gates is St Vladimir's Cathedral. Here, some of the points of interest and artworks to be found in the grounds. The red building is part of the university. Finally, we see the delivery and planting of the tree. This story has not received much publicity yet, due to the fact that Australia's embassy in Ukraine is currently closed and operating from Warsaw. It is hoped that the embassy will reopen in Kyiv soon, at which time the ambassador hopes to visit the tree in its new home. On the left, Steve Matthews, another volunteer, with a very happy-looking lady in the black top, the curator of the subtropical greenhouse, Tetiana Kolomiets. On the right is Larissa Pavlivna, a local volunteer with 50 years of service in the gardens, and Shaun Hopkins. Marina Gaidazi, the director of the gardens, tells me that the tree is still actively growing, with new lateral and apical shoots to be seen. It has since been repotted into a larger pot with a more suitable substrate. She says that it's fantastic that such an ancient plant was found at the end of the 20th century.